Okay. Alrighty, so vases. Now I'm gonna do that thing where I pull several things from one piece of clay. I also, what am I missing? I need a board. Oh.
Stuff last week. Not, yeah, last week.
There's this kid set up like that.
I know, I didn't know that.
All right, so first thing, I'll just make kind of a couple vases that, you know, are standard kind of size. You know, and I don't mind if you make some small vases, but the this is good. My computer's gonna get splattered. You know, one of the objectives is to put these pieces into a wood kiln or the soda kiln, and so that's to get that atmospheric and play with kind of a surfaces that aren't necessarily glazed. You know, so if I were to put those into a wood or a soda kiln, I would very strategically place glaze and not put glaze on the whole surface, especially on the outside. If I want it to be able to contain water or hold, you know, things like flowers and things like that need water, you do want to glaze the inside. But most of the time, you'll find that people don't necessarily glaze the outsides of things, or they would glaze a very specific area, like on this dude right here. I would probably glaze the inside up and over to the rim here. And then I would probably glaze like that middle area that has that texture. And then I would very carefully glaze down at the bottom also, right? To highlight those features. And then let the rest of it just get hit by wood ash or soda ash. I believe I have a like a PowerPoint of some stuff that's wood fired, soda fired, but honestly, you can look around the classroom. A lot of the stuff that is here is wood fired or soda fired. And why do people do that, Bethany? Well, it's just another kind of firing. But the wood kiln is the one where we need work and we need people. So you get to experience that. Remember, it's just a 3-hour shift. We haven't signed up for those, and that has not been made available yet. So because I'm not going to flip these over and trim them, I'm just gonna, you know, it's basically a continuation of the cylinder. That's why the vase is, you know, a natural follow-up. You can trim vases. Again, the taller and the narrower your top gets, the more difficult it is to have to trim something upside down. So sometimes, I think I showed you how to use like your wooden knife to do some trimming, like down into the bottom of things. So that's always a good solution if you want to make a form. Maybe that's like kind of like that really super narrow, tall, skinny, like that one. The one that's over to the left there. Obviously, we can't be flipping that one over, right, and trimming it. Or we could, there are, shouldn't necessarily say that. I never use these because I don't think I need them. But there are these things over here. These are called chucks. And they're various sizes for various purposes. But if you happen to have a vase that is tall and narrow, but sits, you can actually get the opening to sit down on this part, not here, right? Because then it puts stress. But if you can flip your thing over. The problem is you gotta center this on the wheel, right? And then you're gonna put wads down. So that's how you might be able to trim something like that. But obviously we don't have something that's gonna fit every single size of thing that people make. So there, you can also make your own chucks. And then you can let them get leather hard, and you can trim your leather hard pieces on a leather hard chuck. So, but if you want to keep it easy on yourself, just don't trim the bottoms. Perfectly good vases don't need trimming. Okay, so here we go. Now with the cylinders, remember, we wanted to keep them straight. Oh, sorry, viewers on Zoom, you missed that whole Chuck conversation and where the Chucks are. But your friends in your class will tell you. Okay, I'm actually talking to people. What? There's a few people who aren't here today, and so I am going to let them know to check this out. Anyway, so for those folks, if anybody comes in is like, what was she talking about with Chucks? Can y'all just do me a solid? Thanks. I'm sure they're just going to be coming running into the classroom. I just watched Bethany's riveting video. I need to know where the Chucks are. Okay, good. So I threw another cylinder. That is not the objective, is it? But throwing the walls pretty thin before you start giving shape is going to be a good idea. If you start to give it shape too early and you make something too narrow and you got a bunch of clay left at the bottom, it's going to be really hard to get that clay out, right? So I would say roughly my thickness here is about like 1/4 of an inch, probably a little bit thicker down here at the bottom, and it's not exciting at all, like in the least, right? This is like the most boring thing. But now I'm going to start to change the form a little bit. I'm going to work down at the bottom. And because I'm working from the, from this mass of clay, I have to always kind of redefine where the bottom is so that when I cut it off, I don't inadvertently cut the bottom off too. So I'm trying to make something that now is a little bit more narrow. It'll get a little bit more narrow at the top. Whenever you do choke in, remember to go back and at least recompress the walls. Right, so it's challenging when you have to use your fingers way down in a cylinder and you can't connect them. I don't really have a solution to that other than as soon as you are able to bring your hands back together, you just go ahead and do that. This is fantastic. Hello. And it's a good thing I went down there and checked because I wasn't actually underneath where the bottom of the form was. Now I am. Okay, so getting the water out. Because I'm going to start to collar this in up here. So collar, choke, whatever you want to call it. But this is your standard kind of vase form, right? Something that swells in the middle, comes in, has like a shoulder or a neck, right? And opens up. Depending on what you want to put in your vase, I mean, most of the time we think of flowers, right? But other people put other things in vases. We have lots of vases with scissors and pencils, but that's just because I have an excess of vases and cylinders. Yeah, because I've been doing this demonstration 2, 3, 4 times a year for 20 years. Good amount of cylinders. So I'm gonna go, I got a little bit of clay left down here. And instead of trying to move that clay, I'm gonna remind you how to use your wooden knife, because people will, again, inadvertently, because they're trying to move that clay out of the bottom, they'll end up ruining a form rather than just going, I can trim that off, and that's okay. It's okay to trim stuff off. You don't want to like leave something that thick and trim it away later. But a little bit of trimming is totally fine. And think about like the alteration videos that you watched. I mean, bowls are certainly not the only thing that you can alter. So this is right, an altered piece. This one's pretty much not. That one has texture to it. So think about how you can kind of dress up the surfaces. Okay, so again, pretty standard shape. I got a little bit of clay down here, so I'm going to use my wooden knife. I'm going to slow down the wheel. I have my other finger right on the inside, right on the opposite side of where this tool is. And you go down. Okay, you don't come up, you go down from above where you need to remove the clay. And then as I push my inside finger into it, it removes that excess material. Now it's going to be a little bit lighter. The shape is a little bit more, something that I would be looking for. I don't mean what I would be looking for in your work. It's what I'm looking for in my work. Everybody is gonna be making their own thing, right? The whole, what does Bethany want me to make thing? Bethany just wants you to follow some of the basic rules, like make sure that you, if you're making a cylinder that doesn't have a trimmed bottom, make sure that you pop up the base, inside the foot ring. Okay. And yeah, okay, so, did anyone have a little K thingamabob go missing? Cool, I'm using it for my string finder. If anyone happens to mention it, you can just let them know that I have it, and I'm happy to give it back. But at the moment, it's me find the string. And if you want to start throwing off the hump, that's fine. You don't have to. Again, it's a more advanced technique. It is a lot more prone to cracking because of the whole compression thing. So if you are really, you feel like your compression skills are good, then, go ahead and start. And if we only have to make 5 vases, my goodness, it's just gonna go lickety split like that. 5 vases by Monday. You have to make like 4 cylinders and do slip and all that other stuff within like 5 days. Yeah.
So for that run, I'm just thinking about stacking. Would you prefer it to be thicker or thinner if you're gonna stack?
It would be thicker. So I am gonna do a mess of shapes right now. And sometimes this is fun. Sometimes people want to think it out, right? So if you are the kind of person who is okay with just like playing around and knowing that the constant is the diameter of whatever the object is, and you can mix and match and play around, go for it. That's how I like to play like that too. But when I want to make a specific form and I need to build it in various parts and pieces, then I do draw it out and I kind of map it out. That one I actually did, like, I have measurements on so that I knew exactly, the proportions that I wanted to be able to make and how to carry those through. Okay, so parts and pieces. For the bottom part, it does have to have some kind of floor. Don't forget the floor on the bottom part, and the rest of them don't necessarily have to. What I'm gonna do, because we're not gonna have enough time for me to get these leather hard and attach them today. But I will do a video of these pieces and I'll put it up on Moodle. Okay, I'll be able to do that tomorrow. And so that way you'll have the, you'll have the basic information. So now that I am stacking, I want to leave them a little bit thicker, but don't go crazy. It doesn't have to be like all of a sudden you leave your things 1/2 inch thick now. Anyone want to guess what what my tall jars are for? They're urns.
One has holes in it.
What's that?
One has holes in it underneath.
Yeah, no, we're just gonna keep them in the bag. It's fine. Most of my urns do not. Like, there's an urn over there. There's a couple urns in the other classroom. Start to look around, you'll find urns all over the place. And if you flip them over, you'll see who they were made for. Because when you make something like that specific for somebody, how many do you have to make? Because we know ceramics. Like a bajillion. Because what if the glaze doesn't turn out on one of them? Or what if one of them cracks? Or what if the carving that you did in one of them? Oh my goodness. So anywho, it's good times. Play. All right, so these are calipers. These are my calipers. Those are the fancy ones. You all have access to these. So these are located right up here. So you basically will get a rough-ish estimate. And as long as, again, as long as you're leaving this a little bit thicker, you can have some wiggle room there. Now, there's not a whole lot to like the end of this shape, right? So I should probably think about that before I go ahead and take it off the wheel. And there's definitely not a very good defined bottom here either. I mean, defined as in like it has been thought about in terms of the design of it. So if you're kind of guessing and playing, some of my go-tos are just to leave kind of this little fishtail kind of bottom. That's usually a good transition, although this is going to be the underside of something. And if this doesn't really have, like, I don't want to, with a form that does this, if it doesn't come back in and you stack it, sometimes it can just look weird and wide. What you want to do with a form that's like this is you just want to try and throw that all in one piece. If it comes in a little bit more, like see how I'm trying to pull it in a little bit, the next piece that I put on top can have another ledge again or something that will help to define and differentiate that and make it look cohesive still though. You know, but the fun part about if you want to do the mixing and matching thing is that you just kind of make a bunch of things and see how they all come together. So you'll see other vases around here. Actually, most of my stacked things are jars. But you'll see other stacked jars around here, like behind PJ, there's a kind of a jade green one. Do you want to grab that? Okay, so now I changed this, so don't forget to always remeasure. Now this is going to be basically the same, you know, if I'm going to continue to build on this, I need to keep this consistent. Okay. Yeah, or just you can be my Vanna. Okay, so it has multiple pieces. You guys probably like, well, I didn't really realize what was going to happen when I picked this up. Okay, so this is a tampon jar. And I made those because somebody, when I was in pre-grad school, what do they call it? Post-bac, said to me, the only way you can be a good potter is if you cook, right? Because you understand food and you understand the vessels, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, there are a lot of other things that you need vessels for. So of course I decided it was time to make tampon jars. But the top part of that fits into a flange that's in the bottom. And actually that part, that one's missing the bottom piece, but there's another thing that goes under there for you to keep your chocolates or, you know, whatever else you need for your thing. So when you go into the bathroom now, you'll see that there's actually 2 tampon jars in there, I think. And if you need them, that's what they're there for. But at any rate, you know, stacking is a really cool way to get height quickly. But just, you know, kind of look around and see. I lost my thing. There it is. It's a string. It's pretty easy to lose. So you don't want to stack these fresh off the wheel. You do want to let them dry because there's probably going to be some excess material that you're going to want to get rid of. Not on this one necessarily, but like the one that I make that's going to go on top of this, it's not going to have a floor. Right. And so the inside of that at the bottom is probably going to need to be like trimmed a little bit and cleaned out. But I will go over that when I do my demonstration that I record. Okay. So for the assembly. I'm going to work for you on my day off tomorrow when I don't have to teach classes because I just feel so guilty. I don't really, but that's okay. I'm going to the Clay Conference in Richmond, Virginia. It's the largest art conference in the world. A bunch of clay people descending into a city. And they're all as nerdy and quirky in our own little weird ways as Rob and myself and all the other clay heads around here.
Talk about the pieces and stuff.
And like how I'm going to change the economic stability of Huntingdon County through empty bowls. Right? Totally makes sense. Yeah. Some of you know about that. Okay, so now I have to make a decision. I can either try to widen this so that the diameter down here meets the diameter down here, or I could throw something upside down. right? And then trim it to fit later. So I think I'll probably end up doing both actually. Or I'm just gonna go down. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna get down to here because I feel like that's probably pretty close. Now, pretty close, if there's like a half an inch of difference, that's not pretty close. That's not close at all. Now, the thing that I'm gonna make that goes on top of this is going to, I mean, if I were to only use this piece, it would look really ridiculous. So I I am gonna throw this piece and make it fit, but I'm probably gonna need to throw something else because this is going to look so silly. But a vase doesn't have to just be tall and narrow, but it can be, right? What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to just make skinny cylinders, right, that are that tall. I don't want to see that. Don't want to see that. Okay. Anybody can stick a paintbrush in a thing of clay and make it 9 inches. So let's not do that, okay? How could I make this look not as ridiculous? I guess what I could do is I could think about the curve that's here, right? And kind of make another curve, make it similar curve right here. Maybe it won't look as ridiculous. I still think it's gonna look ridiculous, but that's okay. Then I might want to make the top just like completely different. And by completely different, I probably mean something more like a little bit different. But again, trying to pick up some of those same elements. Okay, so you see how my calipers were touching the sides? That's a good fit. And if you want to make a few pieces so that you can mix and match, you just, make like one of these, keep the calipers. And you can use ribs, like really start playing with some of your tools now. Because, your tools can really help you make some cool shapes. This is gonna be silly. You have a question? Or are you just looking up there? No, you're fine. All right, so that's totally different, right? We're just gonna. So now I think this still has. Where'd my... So if it does have a bottom, that's totally fine. Guess what you get to do on purpose? Trim through it. It does have a bottom. So I'm going to trim that off later, but the sizes match, right? Okay. And let's see. So I think honestly, like that first shape was a little small. If I were to do that over again, I would probably like make more of like an egg shape, a little bit taller, so that the connection is not almost the widest point. Because again, when you have those connections that are at the widest point of something, especially down low, it just makes it look kind of awkward. I don't really know how to describe that in any other way until I start to put this together. And then maybe I'll be able to articulate that a little bit better. So now I want to try to make something that just kind of starts here and goes in and up. That was my intention with that one, but I didn't have enough width in my clay because I wasn't paying attention. So you do not have to report to class for the rest of the week. Like I said, you still have to do your work. So make sure you get that done. Make sure you get your papers, your first drafts in Wednesday. And I'm moving some things around. If you see anything on there that's like inspiration, forums, or inspiration PowerPoints, those are being converted into the second and third versions of the same critique that you're doing. So that you're constantly building and refining the way that you're able to do a critique, okay? I might ask you to do like a different piece, see how well you're able to apply the same language to something else. Okay. But what I used to do, which I think is still valuable, I used to have y'all look up, kind of like I did for, well, like you did for the critique piece anyway, but I would have y'all look up vases, I would like have you look up the forms that we're working on and do a PowerPoint and talk about the elements and principles of design, what you like about the pieces, but it would all be relative to the assignment. The problem with that was that like the development of how you critique never really, like people got so focused with just finding cool new things that the development of the actual language, the oral and written communication was not being developed very well. So I am trying this other alternative way of demonstrating oral and written. And that's a thing too that is not really talked about. If you would prefer to do a presentation that you record on, you know, like, I don't know, PowerPoint or something, that's totally fine. Has to be the equivalent of whatever the word count is for the paper. But sometimes doing a presentation is nice because you can, you know, you can use the arrow, you can use the cursor, you have the image kind of a little bit bigger. Okay, so if you look at the shorter one, right, this kind of looks like that centerpiece. Again, going in like the exact opposite direction, so that you have, you know, you're breaking up the form and it looks intentional rather than trying to make something taller by stacking and smoothing. You can try that. So do you all understand what I mean by putting something together and stacking it and smoothing it so that it looks like it's one piece? Okay, so you can try that, but it's more difficult than it sounds. But you're also dealing on a smaller scale. I'm thinking of the students who were making the things like that. So it won't be quite as hard. Okay. It's always double check because as you're throwing, you know, excuse me, things change. So if I'm cutting off down here and my calipers are already hitting up here, it's too big. So I'm gonna pull that in a little bit. I'm probably gonna need to change my shape a little bit because am I confident at this very moment that this is gonna look good on this? Nope. In fact, it's probably gonna look ridiculous, just like the other one. But you know, the way that you figure these things out is just by playing. I used to make my pots like this all the time, right? And it became completely second nature to me. I didn't have to think about the different types of forms that I was throwing. I just kind of knew what looked good together. So you don't have enough time to develop that kind of, you know, interior knowledge necessarily, or I should rephrase that and just say, I don't expect you to. But that is how you would, you know, make these stacked forms without having much of a plan and still having success. But it's kind of like, oh, we haven't done handles yet. It's kind of like handles where you want to make more than one handle for your piece, right? Especially because A, they could break, B, the handle that you make for something, you might put on, you're like, oh, wow, that looks terrible, right? Or it doesn't function well, or I can only get one finger in it. So always give yourself options. So that's why I have that top for that one. I have this top for that one. Hell, who knows? I might like put this on there and then put that on top of that. I might flip it over and give this a bottom, and that is gonna connect to that, and then that connects to this. I have no idea. So it's kind of, there's a lot of options, and sometimes that freaks people out. So, if that makes you nervous, then just kind of have an idea in your head, draw something out, and see where you can break the form up, where it makes sense logically. Thing. On the floor again? Tucked in here again? So I heard somebody went to Florida. Anyone else go anywhere? You went fishing? Uh-huh.
Didn't get any.
Did any? Yeah, I know. We heard about that too. Anyway. So, right, I have to clean that up. That's gonna look like garbage if I try to attach that. So I have to